as evidenced by the fact that all of his vast correspondences, Synesius only ever wrote one letter to Cyril in which he treats the younger bishop as unexperienced and misguided. In a letter written to Hypatia in 413, Synesius requests her to intercede on behalf of two individuals impacted by the ongoing civil strife of Alexandria, insisting, "You always have power, and you can bring about good by using that power." He also reminds her that she had taught him that a Neoplatonic philosopher must introduce the higher moral standards of political life and act for the benefit of his or her fellow citizens. In 414, Cyril closed all the synagogues in Alexandria, confiscating all the property belonging to the Jews and expelling all of the Jews from the city. Orestes, the Roman prefect of Alexandria, who was also a close friend of Hypatia and a recent convert to Christianity, was outraged by Cyril's actions and sent a scathing report to the emperor. The conflict escalated and a riot broke out in which Parabolani, a group of monks under Cyril's authority, nearly killed Orestes. As punishment, Orestes had Ammonius, the monk who had started the riot, publicly tortured to death. Cyril tried to proclaim Ammonius a martyr, but Christians in Alexandria were disgusted, since Ammonius had been killed for inciting a riot and attempting to murder the governor, not for his faith. Prominent Alexandrian Christians intervened and forced Orestes and Cyril to come to an uneasy truce. During the negotiations, Orestes frequently consulted Hypatia for advice, because she was well liked among both pagans and Christians alike. She had not been involved in any previous stages of the conflict, and she had an impeccable reputation as a wise counselor. Despite Hypatia's popularity, Cyril and his allies attempted to discredit her and undermine her reputation. Socrates Scholasticus mentions rumors accusing Hypatia of preventing Orestes from reconciling with Cyril. Traces of other rumors that spread among the Christian populace of Alexandria may be found in the writings of 7th century Egyptian Coptic bishop John of Nicaea, who alleges in his chronicles that Hypatia had engaged in satanic practices and had intentionally hampered the church's influence over Orestes. And in those days there appeared in Alexandria a female philosopher, a pagan named Hypatia, and she was devoted at all times to magic, astrolabes, and instruments of music, and she beguiled many people through her satanic wiles, and the governor of the city honored her exceedingly, for she had beguiled him through her magic, and he ceased attending church as had been his custom, And he not only did this, but he drew many believers to her, and he himself received the unbeliever at his house. During the Christian festival of Lent in March 415, the Parabolani, under the leadership of a lector named Peter, raided Hypatia's carriage as she was traveling home. They dragged her into a nearby church known as the Caesareum, where they stripped her naked and murdered her using ostrakos and nylon, which can either be translated as roof tiles or oyster shells. They tore her body into pieces and dragged her mangled limbs through the town to a place called Cenarion, where they set them on fire. Socrates Scholasticus presents Hypatia's murder as entirely politically motivated and makes no mention of any role that Hypatia's paganism might have played in her death. Instead, he reasons that she fell a victim to the political jealousy which at the time prevailed, for as she had frequent interviews with Orestes, it was calumniously reported among the Christian populace that it was she who prevented Orestes from being reconciled to the bishops. Socrates Scholasticus condemns the actions of the mob and declares that surely nothing can be farther from the spirit of Christianity than the allowance of massacres, fights, and transactions of that sort. Among modern historians, Hypatia's death is usually either blamed on Cyril of Alexandria's jealousy, cast as a side event in the power struggle between Cyril and Orestes, or interpreted as a violent manifestation of the pre-existing turmoil in Alexandria. Modern historians still debate whether and to what extent Cyril may have been involved in the incident. Many historians consider it likely that Cyril at least had some prior knowledge of the murder, but a minority argue that he was totally uninvolved. Hypatia's death sent shockwaves through the empire. For centuries, philosophers have been seen as effectively untouchable during the displays of public violence that sometimes occurred in Roman cities, and the murder of a female philosopher at the hands of a mob was seen as profoundly dangerous and destabilizing. Although no concrete evidence was ever discovered definitively linking Cyril to the murder of Hypatia, it was widely believed that he had ordered it. Even if Cyril had not directly ordered the murder himself, it was self-evident that his smear campaign against Hypatia had inspired it. The Alexandrian council was alarmed at Cyril's conduct and sent an embassy to the First Council of Constantinople, which appointed Alexandrian patriarchs Theodosius as advisors, launched an investigation to determine Cyril's role in the murder. The investigation resulted in the Parabolani being removed from Cyril's power and instead placed under the authorities of Orestes. Cyril himself allegedly only managed to escape even more serious punishment by bribing one of Theodosius II's officials. Historian Edward J. Watts argues that Hypatia's murder was the turning point in Cyril's fight to gain political control of Alexandria. Hypatia had been the linchpin holding Orestes' opposition against Cyril together, and without her the opposition quickly collapsed. 2 years later, Cyril overturned the law, placing the Parabolanians under Orestes' control, and by the early 420s, Cyril had come to dominate the Alexandrian Council. Hypatia has been described as a universal genius, but she was probably more of a teacher and commentator than an innovator. No evidence has been found that Hypatia ever published any independent work or philosophy, and she does not appear to have made any groundbreaking mathematical discoveries. During Hypatia's time period, scholars preserved classic mathematical works and commented on them to develop their arguments rather than publishing original work. It has also been suggested that the closure of the Mausoleum and the destruction of the Serapeum may have led Hypatia and her father to focus their efforts on preserving seminal mathematical books and making them accessible to their students. The Suda, a 10th century AD Byzantine encyclopedia, mistakenly states that all of Hypatia's writings have been lost, but modern scholarship has identified several works by her as extant. This kind of authorial uncertainty is typical of female philosophers from antiquity. Hypatia wrote in Greek, which was the language spoken by most educated people in the eastern Mediterranean at the time. In classical antiquity, astronomy was seen as being essentially mathematical in character. Furthermore, no distinction was made between mathematics and numerology or astronomy and astrology. It is possible that Hypatia may have edited her father's commentary on Euclid's Elements. Her father mentions the manuscript as being the recension of my philosopher daughter Hypatia, though it is not clear whether she edited or revised her father's work or indeed authored any part of it. Theon also edited the existing version of Euclid's Elements, correcting scribal errors that had been made over the course of nearly 700 years of copying, and Hypatia is believed to have assisted him. Theon and Hypatia's edition of Euclid's Elements became the most widely used edition of the textbook for centuries, and almost totally supplanted all other editions. Hypatia may have also edited the existing version of Ptolemy's Almagest. It was once thought that Hypatia had merely revised Theon's commentary on Almagest based on the title of Theon's commentary on the third book of Almagest, which reads, Commentary of Theon of Alexandria of Book 3 of Ptolemy's Almagest. Edition revised by my daughter Hypatia the philosopher.